American history, and you know, I'm German, we could go into this, but you know. Some very silly things happen, but there are some serious things and some really funny things. Today we're going to talk about the really, really funny things. And we've got Ashleigh and Dhriti who are very qualified for this, because Ashleigh, she does history, and then Dhriti, she does silly things. So, so if you combine the two together, it's going to be a very good talk.
Okay. Hi everyone. So today T and I are going to be talking about 10 of the dumbest things that went down in human history, and to make them all a little bit more relatable to you, because a lot of them happened quite a while ago, we're going to tell you why failing your mocks is not such a big deal in comparison, to make you all feel about it.
Okay, well, we're going to start off with 3 of the dumbest decisions companies have made in history. The first was by Decca Records, who auditioned this group, this band, and rejected them, saying that guitar groups are on their way out and that there is no future for them in show business. This group, we now know them as the Beatles. The second is when this person wrote this story, this brilliant story, and then she went along, and the first 12 publishers she met and offered the story's rights to rejected them. And then it was finally accepted by Bloomsbury, and that was at the insistence of the CEO's 8-year-old daughter. This story we now know as Harry Potter. And then there's the Western Union, which was at its time the biggest network company in the entire world for its communications, because it dominated the telegraph industry. And this guy goes up to them and offers a patent for his new invention. That the CEO bypassed all their sales attendants to refuse, and personally wrote a letter to this inventor saying that they had no need for this electrical toy. This guy went ahead and created his own company to sell his product, which was Graham Bell's telephone, and we now know that company as AT&T, one of the biggest telecommunications companies in America.
So the next one, some of the older people in the room might actually remember watching this, but the moon landing was broadcast to over 500 million people when it first happened, and as you may or may not know, it was very grainy imagery because it was being live broadcasted. So NASA smartly thought, okay, we'll record it as well on high definition on tape so we can watch it back later and people can see all of this amazing footage of something landing on the moon for the first time. Unfortunately, someone at NASA managed to tape over all of the original moon landing recordings, which is bad enough until they also no one actually realized that they did this until 25 years later, when someone was like, oh, I wonder where those moon landing tapes are, and they realized that they had been replaced with something pretty mediocre that NASA didn't even end up continuing to pursue.
And then NASA basically designed this operation for this space Mars orbiter with half the team using British units and English units, and half the team using metric units. And they only realized this problem when the orbiter cracked and burned just as it was about to enter Mars's atmosphere. And then they realized they had to investigate the problem. And that's when they realized that the biggest problem was that their systems didn't even detect the problem, that half the team used English units and half of them used metric.
Okay. Next is basically Mehmed II, who was the leader of the Ottoman Empire at the time. This is about the fall of Constantinople, and he wanted to essentially conquer Constantinople because it was the last part of the Christian Roman Empire at the time. So him and his army set out to go and conquer this huge, really important city. And as you can see, they started by attacking the Macedonian walls, which proved pretty unsuccessful because, as you can see, it's pretty fortified. So then they decided, if we can't go over them, we'll go under them. Tried to tunnel under the walls. That was also unsuccessful. So finally, Mehmed II led all of his Ottoman Empire in a final siege on Constantinople and decided that we'll all just sort of attack at once and give one final push. But the Byzantines, who were inside Constantinople, inside the walls, knew what was about to happen, and so they fought back pretty well, and they were resisting all of the pressure that the Ottoman Empire was putting on them, until they were suddenly completely overwhelmed by the Ottomans, completely wiped out, and it was all because one person left a gate open in the walls and managed to let all the Ottomans in, despite their best efforts, which was a pretty crucial mistake, seeing as it led to the fall of Constantinople.
Well, you can just read this, I won't read it aloud. But basically, to all the countries that are planning to invade all of Asia or all of Europe, just leave Russia alone. Leave them out of it. You're not going to win over them in the winter.
Okay. So in 218 BC, Hannibal decided that his biggest goal in life was that he was going to conquer Rome. And so in an attempt to do this, because conquering Rome wasn't a particularly easy task, he decided to lead his army of over 90,000 men, elephants, horses, all sorts of pack animals, over the Alps, and then launch a surprise attack on Rome, which sounds like a pretty good plan. So on the way up the Alps, they didn't have any problems, he planned it pretty well, and then as they walked back down the Alps on the decline towards Rome, they started slowing down and they were making as much progress as possible. And due to it being quite a time-sensitive operation, seeing as they wanted to surprise attack the Romans, Hannibal wasn't satisfied with how fast they were moving and decided to sort of full steam ahead in front of all of his troops, demanded to his main officer, what's happening, why aren't we moving as fast? They explained it's a pretty treacherous area, like we have to slow down. Hannibal wasn't having it, slammed his cane into the ground, which caused an avalanche that killed a third of his army and delayed them for 15 days, and when they finally arrived in Rome, pretty much had to turn back and go home.
Well, basically, in 1788, the Austrian army accidentally attacked itself and lost 10,000 men.
Most of you probably know this one, but it was too good to leave out. So for those of you who don't know or need reminding, the Greeks fought a 10-year war trying to take over Troy, and finally decided that fighting against them wasn't going to work. They had to employ a new tactic. So they created the Trojan Horse, which you can see, which is debatable whether or not it existed, but we're just going to assume it exists for the purposes of this presentation. They constructed this horse, which hid the Greek army in its belly, and then they all got on their ships, said, we're leaving, pretended to sail away, and they left one of their soldiers with his horse, who essentially knocked on the door of the gates of Troy and said, we surrendered, and we're sorry for all the hassle we've given you, so we've made you this giant horse as a gift, and it's an offering to Athena, we're sorry for all the trouble we've caused, like, we'll leave you alone now. And Troy was like, the city of Troy was like, okay, that's great. Brought the horse in, closed the gate, and then the Greek army returned, essentially sailed away, did a U-turn, came back in the middle of the night, and some of the soldiers hidden in the horse's belly crawled out through a trapdoor, which the people in Troy didn't bother checking for, opened the gates to Troy, and essentially led all of the soldiers in and wiped out and conquered Troy.
Okay, well, this man, he's a general, and in battle, he stopped and turned to his men, and he was saying that, and midway through claiming that they couldn't shoot him from that distance, he got shot and died.
And finally, so with Arnie Live celebrating 100 years since the First World War, you guys have probably heard a lot about it, and you probably all more or less know about the origins of it, especially the shooting of the Duke Franz Ferdinand. But what some of you may not know is that the morning of his assassination, Franz Ferdinand was in his motor car, and he was driving on the road, and someone threw a bomb at his car, which bounced off the hood of the car, rolled underneath the car behind him, and essentially injured a lot of his men in the cars behind him, but left him completely fine. So later in the day, just on a whim, decided, oh, I'll go visit all of my men who have been injured, like, pretty sucky. And then on their way to the hospital, the driver, whose name was Leopold Lojak, didn't really know where he was going. He didn't realize they were going to the hospital, so he hadn't had any time to prepare, So he should have taken a right, instead took a left, And sitting on a cafe about 6 meters away on that left turn was the man, Gabriel Princip, who ended up assassinating Franz Ferdinand. So Gabriel, who was sitting at a cafe, saw the car turn, realized who was in it, stood up and shot them, and that's how the First World War started.
So even if you failed your marks, at least you didn't erase arguably one of the most important pieces of footage for mankind.
Use kilograms and pounds in the same physics question.
Leave your door unlocked and cause the fall of one of the world's greatest cities.
Think you could invade Russia in the winter.
Attack your own team and kill 10,000 of your own teammates.
Not realize that a gift from your enemy is probably a little bit suspicious.
Ruin your ultimate goal in life thanks to an ill-timed tantrum.
Reject the next big thing.
Arguably cause the First World War.
Thank you.